Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast.
Hey guys, we have kind of an interesting discussion point. We're down in the gym and I was out or part of some cool training with this group of people today, and we thought we'd take the opportunity to have a kind of round robin open discussion and pick their brains, because all of them are successful and elite in some way, shape, or form in their personal lives, in their business lives, professional lives, etc. So going around the room, we've got Mr. Henry Akins, black belt under Rickson, Gracie. We've got my coach, Dan Hart, Mr. Travis Davison, Vice President of SBG International, and you are the owner of 3 of the SBG gyms, originally in Portland, Oregon.
Started in Portland.
Now you're in Montana.
Yep.
Miss Leah Taylor, multi-time champion and all kinds of badass stuff, black belt, and you run one of the SBG gyms. Beat me up multiple times this weekend. And you brought your boy toy, Andy Stumpf, with, right? Founder of very famous podcast, which our friend Paul Sharp has been on a few times, the Cleared Hot podcast, and you like to jump out of airplanes and do flying squirrel things and things of that nature, which is super cool. Another guy that also beat me up this weekend. And then our great Derik. and then Derik. Actually, Derik is probably the sharpest one in the group and says nothing and keeps quiet. But Derik got his purple belt this weekend from Coach Dan, Professor Dan, and has a lot to offer, and we're going to share that with you now. So kind of the premise here is Jiu-Jitsu, right? So I'm like the greenest, most beat-on one on the list here.
Is that actually true? I thought he's been training for almost 20 years.
Sure, but that's still greenest, right? You could do the things weekly, wrong. And so there's a great point.
Got more time on the mat today, but
There's a great point. All of us have heard, like you guys that are listening to the discussion we're about to have, we've all heard the analogy of sports or martial arts having some tie-in to life or business. So I thought we could kind of chat about how those things, like you, for example, Andy, have rose in your professional career to the highest echelons of military service. Or somebody like Derik is some of the highest echelons of governmental service and leadership. Or Henry with his jiu-jitsu. Or this guy has got some of the most successful gyms. And you're a black belt that beat me up today. Thank you very much. So you spent, how many years did you spend training?
About 12.
12? Mm-hmm. Super dedicated or like once in a while?
Pretty dedicated.
I'm assuming so. I
didn't do it the way you
Right, and it was kind of like steering you towards that. You know, and Dan, on top of being a black belt under Henry, is hyper successful in the business world, which is something that he and I connected in before training together. So I just think like it's a kind of a cool concept to kick around, and I know every one of you appreciates the analogy that I'm talking about. Agree or disagree? Yeah. So maybe just kick that idea around. Like you, for example, we talked last night. You own 3 gyms, SBG,
Yep.
Montana.
Yep, Kalispell, Whitefish, and Missoula.
And is that an easy business, a hard business to be in, running a training gym?
Well, we kind of talked about this last night. I mean, for me, I think business is business. I think a lot of people think running a jiu-jitsu school would be fun and easy. Just like people who like to cook think running a restaurant would be fun and easy. Mm-hmm. But the reality is you have to be good at business to be successful at anything, really. So I wouldn't say it's easy, no. I mean, I enjoy it because it's something I'm passionate about, but the work is still work. And Leah can tell you she moved back to Montana thinking she would open her own gym, and I remember about a year after watching Keith and I, she said, "This is too much work. I don't think I want to run a gym anymore."
I don't know if those were quite my words, but yes.
Kind of like somebody that likes to cook ending up in a kitchen and saying, now I'm sweating over a stove all day and I no longer enjoy it.
Well, you see it in almost everything. Cooking is an easy example, but I mean, think of all the people that you've run into that have this idea like, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome if I could shoot guns for a living, or would it be awesome if I could, drive cars or whatever? And what they forget is that all businesses have, there's a marketing component, there's the bookkeeping, which screws everybody up. And then we haven't even started to talk about employees and what
Sure.
a mess that is.
I also think though,
Yeah.
Training people.
any business you're looking at, I mean, I think the least most important component to owning a gym is being good at jiu-jitsu. You don't have, there's plenty of gyms that are hyper successful without people that are really that good. Just like having great food or a great chef does not mean that you should open a restaurant or that your restaurant's going to be even remotely successful. And, you look at some of the traditional martial arts schools that are just pumping money out. They're not probably actually teaching people to defend themselves.
They've got a good model to sell and promote. Yeah. What say you?
About business?
Or I mean, not even business, but just maybe the general correlation between, like, you've been studying jiu-jitsu for 2 years, you beat my ass for 2 days, so clearly you're investing a lot of time. You're a physical dude, you're physically fit, have done hard things in life, but...
I feel like your jiu-jitsu just sucks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, everything's easier than it looks on paper, or the idea that you have in your head, and then you get into the reality of it, and it's far more complex. I mean, if you look at jiu-jitsu, it's weight distribution. Just use gravity, use the right angles and leverage, and then try to do that with another human being who's been doing it longer. And yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but on paper, I'm sure Henry could write out probably a 1-pager of mastery of jiu-jitsu philosophies and just go ahead and hand that to somebody and see how it goes.
Do you see in your training correlations to things that you did in the service from like an ethos mindset standpoint? Clearly you're the kind of guy that doesn't just quit.
The ethos thing can get confused. It's good to have an ethos, but it's bad to think that everybody lives up to that ethos. I haven't been around jiu-jitsu long enough to see if it's the same, but what I will say is in the military community that I came from, we did have an ethos, but it was still up to the individual to live up to that. And you would get deviations, some people who lived up to it, and then more than I would care to admit that did not. And I think the same is probably true in business or the philosophy in gym. I mean, it's great to have, in the Navy in boot camp, it says honor, courage, and commitment on the wall. And that's great for a hallmark.
Isn't there like a saying that the unit doesn't make the man makes the unit, something like that?
It would have to be plural, but yeah, the individual.
Yeah, like it's not like this being here isn't going to turn you into something. You, as the men that are part of it, or women, kind of turn it into what it is or is not.
Yeah, at the end of the day, in my old job at least, it came down to the human being. You could have, the camouflage uniforms we wore were $800 a pair, and then there's helmets and night vision goggles and guns and bulletproof vests and all that stuff. But if you don't know how to use them, or the operator, the human being underneath all that stuff is not up to the task, and it really doesn't matter how fancy or flashy you look.
That makes good sense. What say you, Derik?
Yeah, so mine's a different viewpoint, right? Like, I'm a government employee and a local government employee,
But wait a minute, let me predicate that.
Right.
Like, we're not going to say where you work because it's nobody's business, but you're the manager of a city. So that basically, for all intents and purposes, is you're a CEO of a multi-million-dollar business.
that's right. Yeah,
What's your guys' yearly budget?
$50 million.
So you're the CEO of a $50 million business, basically. And people might hear this and say, a city's not a business. Don't freak out. The point is that that's everything from sewer and water, streets and sanitation, police, all the contracts with garbage and Christmas lights that go up, right? That all comes across your desk.
Yeah, there's a couple different mindsets, right? I mean, you could have the stereotypical government employee that, just may not care about the money that he or she is spending as part of that budget, or you could have what I like to think I am, and that's that I'm a steward of public funds, and I want to do what's best for the municipality.
That sounds like a pretty politically motivated statement. A steward of public funds. I love you.
It's the stock statement, yeah. But I mean, it's still, what it comes down to is it still takes leadership.
Yeah.
Right? You're still dealing with employees and training and organizational development, and trying to provide integrity for that organization. Are you speaking the truth? Are you living in the truth? Those are all things that apply across the board, whether it's jiu-jitsu or local government or business. If you're not in integrity, then you're going to have issues. So that's what's important to me. That's what I like about the jiu-jitsu community is the integrity aspect of it. That people, you can't. The mat doesn't lie, right? I mean, we talk about that all the time.
Yeah, we say the target doesn't lie, the mat doesn't lie. Same thing. Yeah.
So you can have whatever patches or come from whatever gym or whatever colored belt, but getting on the mat is
the equalizer.
Proof of how much time you've actually put in to that craft.
I like that. Hey Henry, how important do you think the friends or associations that you have are to one's success? So you've reached a high level of training, and people look at you as an authority in this field or realm. You just finished a seminar. People flew you across the country to teach to a group of people. You've got your hidden jiu-jitsu that people are members of. How important is it? Can you do it all in your head? Do you have people you lean on?
You mean to run my business?
Just in general, So you trained under Rickson. How important is it that the people you surround yourself with? Maybe that's the simplest way I could phrase it.
I think that's everything in life. I use that metaphor all the time, right? The people that you surround yourself with. If you want to see how successful you're going to be, look at the people that you surround yourself with. So I think that has a huge influence in your life. That's one of the things that me and Travis were talking about when I was in Montana just a couple months ago. Was that's one of the amazing things about jiu-jitsu is the relationships that you build and the people that you have around you. I think jiu-jitsu is pretty unique in that it definitely, I think martial arts in general really helps to build character in human beings because of the struggle. And if you're in it long enough, you're going to have to overcome a lot of struggle. You're going to have to humble yourself.
Get beat up by Andy and his girlfriend.
Exactly. And so, I think definitely just being involved in martial arts, I've met almost all my close friends are through the martial arts. All the people that I've met that I'm the closest with have been through the martial arts. So I think it's really important, right? The people that you surround yourself with are who you're going to, and I think a big part of it too is also the type of person you are attracts like.
Yeah.
Right.
That's super important.
I would say though there's some confusion I think in jiu-jitsu that I think it can build character, it can do those things, but it amplifies the qualities you have. If you're not a good person, training jiu-jitsu is not going to suddenly make you a good person. And there's been a lot of things in our community in the last couple of years with the internet where, rightfully so, some people that should not be training and should not be being taught how to be more effective at hurting people have been exposed.
You just talked about that the other day, a guy that you knew that did some bad stuff with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, the guy was a friend of mine who got in trouble with the police for, domestic battery, and I kicked him out of the gym. Mm-hmm. That wasn't easy, but if I'm teaching you to be more effective at hurting people and you're hurting people that are smaller, weaker, and need protecting, then there's zero chance that I'm going to teach you to be more effective at hurting people.
So that kind of goes right back to the same thing of the unit doesn't make the man or the school doesn't make the man, but that guy had to come with some stuff already in him.
Yeah, and there's been some associations with sexual predators and stuff that have come out with people that were high ranking black belts and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, as a community, it's our job to police that and to not fall victim to that or to say, well, maybe that person should be able to train. I think absolutely they should not.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. I don't know how the others feel about it.
Like you train every day. You run one of the gyms, right?
I work for Travis, at his gym and help run the Callus Belt gym.
So what are some concepts, like the purpose of this podcast, the Higher Line podcast, we try to pass on information that is meaningful, right? All the life experiences of everybody here, we could run a pretty cool company. We could probably take over a political campaign. We could probably put him in charge and take over a city if we needed to, right? We've got all kinds of skill sets. What do you in your daily life do or have learned that's meaningful to average Joe or Jane that they can adapt or adopt in their life to maybe see some change?
I was talking to one of the students about this the other day, that you create your training environment and your training partners. So especially as a coach, I help police the mat culture. So how students train with each other, how they talk to each other, you know, what's tolerated on the mat, that becomes the standard. And because it's also my training environment, that in turn, you know, becomes the people that I roll with, I train with. So they're not just my students, they become my teammates and my peers eventually, you know, after they've been training longer. Friends, yeah. So just helping them get past that new phase where they're trying to win at the expense of maybe hurting their teammate or, you know, not learning technique. So helping them get through that and being patient with that so that we have a great training environment and being understanding when they're not doing that correctly right away. Using words now instead of mat enforcement, the way things used to be. Trying to use our words.
The good old days.
Mat enforcement.
I'm still okay with that way.
Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I've had some experiences where I had the enforcement role and it feels really good. That mat justice feels so good, right? And then
Mat
the
justice.
person turns around and does the same thing to someone else on the same mat. Happened to be another woman that was about my size, but she was new. So when she got thrown really hard, she didn't choke the guy, she just cried. And I was like, oh, maybe I should have had that conversation before that happened. So I'm trying to talk to people now, and we kind of have adopted more of a 3 strikes rule now, that if you're not getting it, then you don't have a place on the mat, and you're going to cost us members in the long term.
Yeah, we've definitely had to get rid of some members over the years.
And domestic battery, same thing. We have a lot of law enforcement on the mat too, so there's not really a place to help them get better at that.
At beating up women and children, that's kind of an important thing.
Well, it seems obvious, but, you know, from the things I've seen online the last couple of years, I mean, there's a lot more of it than I thought.
It's tolerated, especially if they're not seeing it, you know.
Yeah, that didn't happen in my gym type of thing. I've
Right.
heard that. Nothing, they don't do anything here.
Well, I was telling Henry, actually, like, I think the first time we met, I won't mention the person's name, but very, very good jiu-jitsu guy. I mean, I remember just smoked me, like, to the point where I called my coach and was like, I don't think I'm a purple belt anymore. Like, this guy came in and just crushed me. And anyways, long story short, turned out that he was wanted by the police, and he had fled another state. And when my brother and Matt and I decided to turn him in, we actually had members of our gym that were like, oh, let's not do that though. He's really good at jiu-jitsu, and he's a really good coach, and he's teaching us. And I'm just like, are you kidding me right now?
Should
Like,
kick them out too.
Right, you're sick.
yeah, no, I mean, I'm not making that up. Like,
Well, I know what
there
you're
were
talking
two-
about. That guy's still in jail.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and he should be. But we ran up against so much resistance. I was just shocked that people would give somebody a pass based on them being really good at a particular thing like jiu-jitsu. And it was like, okay, because, you know, you submitted Marcelo Garcia twice, you get to do whatever you want, and we're just going to overlook it. And then I got a lot of heat too online from that, where people were
You're trying to figure out who he's talking about. He just gave you a clue if you Google.
and they were giving me grief, like I can't believe those guys in Portland turned him in.
Turned into a rapist.
Yeah.
Serial rapist.
It talks about people's motivations. It's kind of like what you're talking about. Are you here to like beat on people or to be better? And,
Well, but look at professional sports. I mean, we have that happen all the time, right? In the NBA or NFL, that
right.
people are.
That's my hero. You can't.
Yeah.
We can just overlook the fact that they did this or that. Yeah, for sure. That's an interesting and telling concept of the depravity of the human condition, really. Talk a little bit about, like, you guys just can spitball whatever. Talk about, like, lessons that, like, when I met you, Dan, and I don't want to bust your nuts, but you were way heavier, right? Years ago, you started your first restaurant. You talk about it. You were eating too much, drinking too much. You got deeply involved. You wanted to be a fighter, and that was
That's how I started training jiu-jitsu. I was about 240 when I started training. I'm 180, 185 now. It's about what I competed middleweight. I started training because I wanted to fight MMA, and I was fat and eating too much and drinking too much, and now I just drink too much. I don't eat too much. But
Salute.
I started training, and I had a few MMA fights, and ended up settling into just doing jiu-jitsu, and it became a huge part of my life. I opened a gym as a purple belt with my still partner, Alex Embry, and he taught at first all the classes. Now we both teach. He's teaching a little less right now with his new job, so I'm teaching a little more. And, you know, for me, different than Travis, my gym is open so that I have a place to train and I can make the schedule. I don't have any interest in having 1,000 students. That's not where my primary source of income is. So for me, and I'm doing that, and you know, it's important to me to be able to bring Henry out a couple times, you know, a year to train, and I go see him as much as I possibly can. I've been to every camp Henry does. Henry's website, hiddenjujitsu.com, is, you know, if I can't be with Henry, I'm on there reviewing techniques, you know.
Yeah.
So
I've got access to it. I get the kind of like the thought process I'm driving to. Something that I've picked up talking with you guys the last few days is the evolution of this craft, which happens with anything, right? Gunfighting, speech, everything evolves. We humans keep putting a spin on things. A couple questions. One, how has jiu-jitsu or the study of a martial craft affected your life in a positive way? Like Derik, you guys promoted him to a purple belt yesterday, and I was there when he got his blue belt a couple years ago, and last night, and I'm not making fun of him, but he got choked up, because I know, and I got choked up watching him, because I know how much work he put in, day out, showing up. Like that's like a meaningful thing to somebody that's like listen to us or hear it, to say, oh cool, the guy got like a different colored cloth thing put around their waist, not understanding the metric ton of energy and busted joints and all those things that went into it. Talk about
Yeah,
that.
so for me, you know, not that, I mean, you need a job to make money, right? And I think I'm good at my job, and I've enjoyed it for a lot of years. But for me, it's always been about physical challenge part of it. I mean, I got fat in my 20s. I gained a ton of weight, and I think I was around 215 or even pushing 220 at some point. I'm like 5'9", so, you know, that's
You were 220?
yeah, that's ridiculous. I was pushing that, and started long distance bike riding in my 30s, and started endurance running in my 40s, and CrossFitted for a while. And I've known Dan actually for probably 20 years at least. And one day I was going through a divorce, and you know, kind of got through that. And at some point, it was just like, man, this kind of reminds me of wrestling. I texted Dan, still got the text. I know he does. And I messaged him, and I'm like, you know, can I just come check this out? You know, and it reminds me of wrestling. I wrestled in high school, coached a long time, and now I've been doing it for almost 4 years. And you know, while you have to have a job, or most people do, to make money, that success to me is not as important to the success that I've realized through jiu-jitsu in the last 4 years, because of it's mano a mano, right? It's you on the mat. You know, nobody's really policing you. You're pushing yourself. It could just be a hobby. Like I could just show up a couple of times a week and say, hey man, I'm gonna get in shape.
And we know people that do that.
Yeah,
right?
and that's cool. If that's what's good for them, that's good for them. But for me, it became, you know, a passion, or it has become a passion. You know, with Dan's help and Henry's help, you know, through Dan and all that, where it's something that I need to do now. You know, it's part of it's who I am, really. I mean, it's really become who I am. I can be the city administrator in my professional life, but you know, I'm more proud of Derik, the jiu-jitsu person, and the accomplishments that because it's been my hard work alone that has created that. Obviously, there's coaches. But again, the mat doesn't lie. So, you know, it's the skill that I've been able to show, I think, in the mats that have gotten me through it. And it's just, there's personal hardship with it. There's physical and mental hardship with it. There's physical issues. And I'm almost 52 years old. So there's, you know, I've had slipped ribs. I got rotator cuff issues, you know, knee. And I could have just said, to hell with it, I'm done. You know, I'm too old for this shit or whatever. But getting through that has made me a better person. It's made me stronger in all aspects of my life, relationship-wise, work-wise, self-confidence-wise, self-esteem-wise. It's strengthened all of those aspects of my life through jiu-jitsu.
What would you say about that, Andy? So the interesting thing about you, I'm not going to talk about your private life because it's your life, but you've done some cool shit that few people in the United States military or militaries in the world could ever get to do based on merit or luck or anything. So like, I'm guessing you don't need to like feel good about your abilities to overcome adversity at this point in your life. Like what do you take away from it besides just beating up good looking guys with good dick jokes?
So first and foremost, you wrote the check of what happened to you.
I did. I did.
And I think that's an open checkbook.
You're currently still writing zeros on that, so that's fine. Long enough memory. I mean, my old job was definitely, it was uncomfortable. It was physically painful often, and it was kind of defined by its extremes. I am more fascinated by the, Henry was talking about it today, the efficiency of jiu-jitsu. Of learning something and then trying to figure out, what do you got?
I'm just going to get this off your head because I'm sure somebody's going to comment that this string was bothering and touching your head.
Or you trying something and then trying to figure out how little energy that you can use. Or I'm sure this happens to everybody when they first start. You don't know what's really happening, and then you realize a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and you become more aware. And then the evolution of how do I possibly get out of this position to then being comfortable down there to then seeing options. I found that to be fascinating, how you can just add more layers into it. And it's, I mean, I think anybody can tell you that it's ridiculously challenging. Physically, emotionally, mentally, and I've always just been drawn to things that are like that. So it's kind of a natural extension, I think, of just what I was searching for when I was in the military.
Now you have your podcast, the Cleared Hot podcast. Talk a little bit about that.
It's a podcast. We record voices and put it on the internet.
And what is the thrust? It's not a comedic podcast, clearly.
It's relationship.
Yeah.
Well, we just recently delved into being relationship experts. We might do monthly episodes of Andy and Mike, the Love Glover.
And Mike's been on this podcast, and
Yeah,
so
he's awesome. I am fascinated by other people and the stuff that they are interested in. And I feel like you often see people on peaks, especially in social media, where like, hey, look at me on the best day of my life. And that doesn't really interest me. I'd rather talk about the valleys that are in between the peaks.
I dig that.
But I'm fascinated by other people. And so starting a podcast gives you an opportunity to reach out to people or get introduced to people and sit down and talk with them about them.
Cool. So most of you have probably heard of this podcast. If you haven't, check it out. Super cool. Paul Sharp, our good friend, has been on it numerous times. What were you going to say?
Let's say when Andy's talking about efficiency, Henry said something to me when I was a purple belt that I try to think about every day when I train. He said, our goal in jiu-jitsu is to get the same or better results with less effort. And anytime I'm thinking about jiu-jitsu, I think about Henry saying that. How do I do the same thing or more or better with less effort?
I want to apply that to communication, business.
It's a life in general.
Yeah, anything. Yeah, that's awesome. Tattoo that on you.
I'm out of room.
You're out of room? Right on your forehead, maybe. I haven't heard much from you.
You gotta ask me a question.
Well, like the thread that we're kind of talking about that, like Andy and Derik just were chatting on.
Oh, you're not just a coach, you're a two-time world champion.
Yeah, so there's
Masters
that.
world champion,
Yeah.
but yes.
And blue belt world champion,
Blue belt world champion at the adult.
purple belt silver medalist.
Yeah, no, I medaled, on the way up for sure.
So you're humble.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess for me it was, you get that feeling of flow from jiu-jitsu.
Talk about that.
You kind of lose track of time, and it's a constant, it pushes you to your very limit mentally and physically, which I think few disciplines do. And in that flow state, you can kind of clear your head and relieve stress, and then afterwards you're better at problem solving, you're better at accomplishing tasks that seem so complicated beforehand. So it's kind of like
So
clearing
the
a
practice
chalkboard.
is a little bit of therapy.
It is, yeah, for sure. It is, and I love the people that I've met through jiu-jitsu, some of my very best friends, I've met through jiu-jitsu, and it eventually became my career, which I never would have guessed when I started with Travis, which was 12 years ago, and pretty much to the day, so.
Go ahead.
What Leah was saying there, I think resonates with just about everybody that does jiu-jitsu. And I think you can accomplish that in other ways too. For us, obviously jiu-jitsu is the way that we accomplish that. But for other people, it could be yoga, it could be playing music, it could be whatever. But for me personally, like I've done yoga and things like that, and my brain's just too wound up. But, if I'm rolling with Henry, there's no space for anything other than thinking about. Yeah. Well, that too. But yeah, jiu-jitsu allows you to do that, and it's kind of counterintuitive. My oldest son had brain surgery.
You're saying it's like causes you to focus, otherwise you fail instantly.
It just you have another human being trying to basically kill you. So you don't have time. You don't have time to think about your grocery list. You don't have time to think about the fight you just got into with your wife. You don't have time to worry about, your son's health problems. Like it's a break from that. And that's where I think it's counterintuitive is, you go into the gym like on a Sunday and you roll for 2 hours, and that's physically exhausting. But you have more energy post 2 hours of exercise than you do before.
100%.
And so that's kind of the amazing thing for me. And just hearing what Leah said, like that is exactly what jiu-jitsu provides for me personally. It's just it's a break from all the other worries, all the other stresses, anxiety, and things that you deal with on a daily basis. And then it's kind of like a recharge, and you walk onto the mat with all these problems, and then you walk off the mat with the same number of problems, but they seem a lot more solvable.
And you got some benefit out of it as well, health-wise and self-protection-wise.
Yeah, health-wise, but you're also learning a functional skill.
Mm-hmm.
That hopefully you don't ever need it, but you've got it.
Yeah. What do you say about that?
Definitely, I agree with them. I mean, for me, it definitely puts me in a meditative state because, like Travis said, it simulates the experience of being attacked by another person, but in a safe
I
environment.
physically was attacked by one of the people sitting on this mat numerous times. He even called my name and was like, "Come here." So I don't think it was a simulation, but go ahead, sir.
And you're still alive. And you can still move around. So, I mean, when you're going through that experience, it really forces you to be in the moment. And I think that's a huge thing for me with jiu-jitsu is it's one of the only times throughout the day that I'm super present and in the moment, and I'm aware of everything going on from this second to this second to this second. I'm not thinking about, oh man, I messed up and I should never have done that, or thinking about the past, or thinking about what I need to do in the future. I'm literally just present. Yeah. And so that for me is huge.
I've got a brother that's a very accomplished rock climber and skydiver. Like when you did tons of jumps, I'm assuming. Do you have any kind of a similar feeling of like disconnecting from day-to-day nonsense when you're on the mat as maybe like jumping out of a plane or some kind of kinetic contact? Is it the same or different?
It's similar. I think I flirted with some hobbies that most people would consider relatively fringe. And I got very comfortable in those environments. And like wingsuit base jumping, for example, I would definitely find the flow state that everybody is talking about where you're, a quarter of a second ahead in your life is the one thing that you're thinking about. And I got very used to that, and I realized what it did for me. I haven't been able to simulate that completely doing jiu-jitsu, but that activity is so far on the far end of driving you into that place. But the benefits that everybody is talking about, for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
I dig that. Kind of the thought process as I was chatting, of course, we could talk about all kinds of things. The common thread between everybody here is the mat we're sitting on, right? The jiu-jitsu. So it's become almost like a fad now. Of course, as I've already stated, I have very little experience in jiu-jitsu. But like I posted something the other day, and it's comical. Posted a picture. Dan and I were doing some training. He's been awesome, doing a bunch of private stuff with me with his time, and the way people approach information. Like there was a couple like just stupid ignorant comments, which happens, but the sport now, or this art is, and you guys have been chatting about it, is kind of becoming bastardized, maybe watered down. Instead of being distilled, it's being like talk about that a little bbit.
Shooting is the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, how many guys do you see on the range in their operator chic attire?
Yeah.
Their sights on backwards.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Right. Like, what is the actual goal? It's not to.
Their goal is to look like a dude they saw on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say like we have members that pay dues so that they can like wear hats and t-shirts and talk
That's
about
a part of the jiu-jitsu.
We had a running joke at my gym. We had a member who would pay his dues, never train, and then every once in a while a payment would become declined, and I would say to Ryan, another one of my employees, hey, why don't you call this guy and ask him to please cancel his membership? He doesn't come in anyways, and his last payment was declined. So Ryan would call him. This had happened about once a year. He'd call this guy. He'd bring his dues current. He'd stop by the gym. He'd buy one of everything that we had on the shelf. And he'd say, yeah, I'm going to start training again. And then he would disappear. And then a little bit of time would go by. He'd go delinquent again. Ryan would call him. He'd come current and then come in and just buy everything off the shelf
You're
again.
like the pastor getting the guy in on Easter or Christmas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do definitely have people that, you see it around town, right? Like, how many people do you see like walking around with like UFC shirts or tap out shirts or, anything related to MMA or jiu-jitsu? It's like, they don't train. Like you just tell by looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
But
ears.
what I was talking about the other day, and I'm aware of the fact that I'm getting old and maybe nostalgic and romanticized and stuff like that, but I just feel like jiu-jitsu from when I started, like I think back to what it was like and what we were learning and how we were training, and then I look at it now and I feel like, yeah, jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu has gotten better. Like, it's gotten more complicated and tricky and like all these weird guards and stuff like that, but I feel like it's lost the reality, the fighting aspect. Like, there's no striking anymore. Like Henry taught takedowns the other day because most jiu-jitsu schools, they don't teach you anything from the feet. Like it's like,
and then in your school we went over striking.
Right. Well, that's because I asked. Yeah, that's what I wanted, and that's what I'm afraid is that as the sport part of jiu-jitsu becomes more popular, the art is going to evolve to that rule set, right? Because if you want to be successful at a particular rule set, then you're going to learn to work that rule set. And the same thing happened with judo. Like, everyone's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if jiu-jitsu was in the Olympics? And I'm like, no, it would turn it into what it did to judo. Like, they would stop letting you grab the legs and they would just change the rules. It would kind of ruin it as far as the martial part of it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's happened at most jiu-jitsu schools. Like, I think most jiu-jitsu schools never teach a punch or a kick. You're lucky if they teach a takedown even.
Dan just went over his stand-in base with his students a couple days ago, and Paul Sharp from SBG, he's the guy that taught me that years ago, but like Dan was explaining, most people don't even understand what we're trying to do here, to stop somebody from trying to attack you. Like, you're not just getting up, but most people that...
Yeah, it's something we do warm-ups every day, and like when I travel the country and go to gyms, 99% of people do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you were trying to get up and I was trying to attack you, you would be stuck on the ground.
This isn't just getting warmed up and getting your joints moving. You're mimicking somebody trying to kick your teeth in as you're getting up off of the parking lot.
I was talking to Henry yesterday during the seminar, even about guard. Like, in my mind, it's stand up, sweep, submit, in that order. Like, those are the three things that you should be doing in order. And I feel like most jiu-jitsu people forget that they can stand up. Like, they lay down and then they're like, I have to submit you from down here. Like, they forget that just standing up is an option. And if the person's not holding you down, there's absolutely no reason why you would put yourself underneath somebody else in that environment.
Well, and the opposite side of that is I don't think most jiu-jitsu people train to keep someone on the ground.
Right. They don't have to.
One of Henry's other black belts I saw made a post or was talking about something, I think, in Henry's site about the fact that he trains with all these MMA guys and wrestlers now, and they don't want to be on the ground with him. So he's had to like alter his game to keep them on the ground, because jiu-jitsu guys want to be on the ground. They're not trying to stand up or get up against the cage or use the wall to stand up. Mike made that post.
Yeah, I have a black belt who's training at alpha male now, and he said his guard passing has gotten a lot better, and he said he's been implementing, you know, all the stuff, like how important the stuff that I was teaching him was, because with the MMA fighters, they're constantly trying to get up. As soon as you take them down, or as soon as they hit the ground, they're immediately posting on their hands, sitting up, trying to get back up. Where, you know, I make that comment all the time that jiu-jitsu guys are very content to just lay on their backs, because it's, you know, when you train in an environment where you don't have to worry about strikes, it's pretty comfortable to just lay back. But as soon as you start implementing strikes into the training, anytime you're on the bottom, even if you have someone in your guard, you're exposed to a lot of danger. And, you know, the person on top always has the advantage in their ability to do damage for the most part.
We always start all training in our programs with what's your goal, why are you here? So that would that's what came to my mind talking about that, like why am I here? To get sweaty and like roll around or get better at protecting myself.
Well, and you know, I think that's a huge problem in the jiu-jitsu community, is a lot of people have heard about jiu-jitsu and gravitate towards jiu-jitsu because they heard about how effective it is as a self-defense art. And what they do is they go into a school not knowing anything. They're like, oh, I heard jiu-jitsu is great. I'm going to put my trust in this instructor to teach me. And then the instructor starts teaching them a style of jiu-jitsu that is more focused on competition, where it's not so much self-defense based, where they'll never learn how to block a punch. They'll never learn how to throw a punch. And then they're learning how to basically use article of clothing for control. And so I feel that that's just something that in the jiu-jitsu community that is kind of been a little bit of a degradation of what the art was originally intended for, was for fighting. And that's, if you watch like the early days of the UFC.
You talk about that a lot when you're teaching. Yeah.
The early days of the UFC, it was, you know, it was so crazy. I think a lot of people don't realize because it was so long ago, but the first UFCs,
Quarter century.
No time limit. There was no weight divisions.
Which is why MMA is not really fighting anymore.
And you had to fight 3 guys in one night to win a tournament. It was a tournament format. Now, obviously the level of athlete wasn't as high as it is today. But when you have that rule set, you have to train in a completely different way. And back then, you know, there was far more allowed. Like nowadays, guys have gloves. You're not allowed to kick to the head. Back then, you could kick. So if someone fell down, you could run up and soccer kick them in the head. You know, you could punch to the groin. There was a UFC where one guy had another guy down. Yeah, and he was, you know, through about.
It was Keith Hackney and Joe
I
Simon.
remember
50
that.
like groin, you know,
And
50
it helped that he had a red
punches.
Speedo on too.
Just beating his junk.
Yeah, so 25 iron answered shots.
No time limit in rounds and standing guys up. Now, if they feel you're inactive on the ground, they stand you up. I mean, it's to a grappler's disadvantage that there's rounds. We don't want rounds. We want to take people down and lay on them.
Yeah, lay on them and pressure the air out of them.
Yeah, it's not entertaining, right? So,
Yeah.
so I mean, I understand the reason for the rule set in order to make it a sport, in order to make it entertaining, and in order for there to be viewers. But you know, if you watch how jiu-jitsu was originally intended to be applied, when I first started training jiu-jitsu, it was how can we develop this art? How do we learn to defeat every other martial art?
So Krav Maga is the only one you guys haven't figured out yet.
We'd
Right,
be dead.
key.
So that's part of the reason that you guys connected with SBG, that Henry Akins and SBG connected, because they have the same mindset.
Same philosophy,
Yeah.
same mindset, the same, you know, all
There
the
was a lot of overlap
yeah.
between like mat and efficiency and weight distributions.
And just, you know, I think too, fundamentals, like that mindset and that idea of mastering the basics, mastering the fundamentals, which it's so crazy because it applies to almost every other skill set in life. But it tends to be a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, people want to focus on the complicated things and the advanced stuff instead of focusing on the basics. You know, and that's what really makes someone a master or extremely high level. So it's just, focusing on the fundamentals.
Let's do this before we finish, because we've been sitting on our butts and working out all day. Let's just go around, and when we do one-on-one podcasts, I always ask people, like we'll start with Derik. Derik, if people that we are talking to or that are listening to us never passed your way again, and this was the only interaction you ever had with them in your life, what would you leave them with?
Find your passion. And, whether that's, again, in your job or outside of your job, find your passion and pursue it. The only person holding you back from doing that is you.
How does somebody, so like if the person's passion was like, I want to be an exotic dance instructor, that's my jam, and how does somebody will themselves to get past that?
Well,
whatever's stopping them.
We stand in our own way, right? We have to get out of our own way. Whatever insecurities, whatever, there's always that voice in your head that says, "Well, I can't do something because of this." I can come up with circumstances, they can come up with excuses all day long, but I'm the only one standing in my way. You're not keeping me from being an exotic dance instructor. Dan's not. Henry's not.
Your wife might be.
I might try to talk you out.
Right. But at the end of the day, only you are standing in your way from becoming an exotic dance instructor.
So what I'm hearing is like awareness of self and being honest with yourself.
Well, we only come around once, right? So you gotta go for it.
I dig it.
Yeah.
What do you say, Andy? Same thing. If these people, hopefully they connect with you on your podcast, which you guys should, go follow it. But if you were talking to these folks at a coffee shop, a bus stop, sitting next to you in the airplane, and you felt like passing on something of value, what would you say?
Probably something that is misunderstood, but I would say that average is good enough. I see people all the time who, again, they only want to look at people who are on an apex, like the shooting world. If you want to get into shooting and the only thing you do is watch videos of grandmasters and all you do is look at yourself in comparison to that grandmaster, you're going to be so unhappy. Mm-hmm. As opposed to just going in and working every day and realizing that very few people will ever get to that grandmaster level, or even in the military is the same thing, or I would say in Jiu-Jitsu. But if you put yourself, I have never done anything exceptional in my life. I have been down the middle of the road, average at everything I have tried.
If you guys could put that camera on me really quick, I'm doing this.
Again, so you're rating yourself against me. My
I'm not rating myself.
Yours is trash.
Wait a minute. I'm really saying.
I was going to buy him his dinner.
But down the middle of the road, if you keep coming and you keep grinding, you're going to end up above average because almost everybody else quits.
Yeah.
They look at those people and they're like, I don't want to do this. And it just I'm not saying don't shoot for exceptional, but also develop a comfort level with where you are and the fact that not everybody's going to be great at everything. I'm sure there's people.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah, and just focus more on yourself than the comparison to where you are against other people.
I dig that. I've oftentimes, when that whole 99% movement came around a few years ago, remember that? Everybody was mad that the 1% had the money. It's well, they do, because the rest of you just don't try hard enough. That's literally, isn't it? You and I talked about it last night.
They say either want the 1% or I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
There's a whole ecosystem that you can
in between.
And you can probably end up very close to that 1% if you just keep showing up.
Show up.
And if you spent less time looking at other people's bank accounts and more time looking at your own.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. What say you?
I would say that it is critical to make time to take care of yourself physically and mentally. And I work with a lot of moms particularly that are working full time and they're doing childcare and they don't consider it important to do any exercise or take any time for themselves, and the result isn't good. They end up
get in the habit of making excuses and.
Well, they're working actually. Yeah. They're just
too
they're
busy
so busy taking care of everyone around them, and they work so hard. and they just don't have anything left for themselves.
I wasn't saying that they weren't viable excuses, but they're just not making the time to.
Yes, they don't consider it important. It's not a priority to
Understood.
take care of themselves, and they end up very unhappy, not as good at parenting or whatever their job is. And so, yeah, just making time to exercise or do some kind of a hobby that you're excited or passionate about, kind of like what Derik was talking about. So not necessarily just resting, but it could even be just another project that you're excited about, and then making some time, not a ton, but maybe even 2 days a week just to exercise and take care of yourself is super important.
What would you say if like a mom or dad, because it doesn't need to be a female, just said like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to do that. My life is busy. I've got these things. Like, what's the response? Because there's always pushback, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I do the appointments to get new people to come in to train, and they're usually pretty unhappy when they come in. They've had some big transition in their life and they want to change things, and I say just start with 2 hours a week. And if you can't find 2 hours a week, then your life is pretty overscheduled.
Okay. All right. I like that. Thank you. How about you, sir?
I liked Leah's answer. I thought that was pretty good. I would just say show up. Like, I feel like a lot of times, and this kind of is going to sound a lot like what everyone else is saying, but I feel like sometimes people fail and are miserable and unhappy because they don't even do the minimum. Like, they don't even just wake up and show up. Like, you don't have to, like Andy was saying, like, you don't have to be the best at it, but if you just show up and go through the motions, eventually you become that thing that you want to be. But so many people just, they can't even show up. I mean, just show up, you know?
And you're talking about to anything, the running track.
Oh, I'm not saying jiu-jitsu per se, or it could be a relationship issue. It could be, you know, parenting. It could be, you know, you work at wherever you work. Just show up, you know, just be there to do the work. And you know, I think that, and in jiu-jitsu, it's for sure true. Like John Frankel talks about all the time, like, you know, you have to be here tomorrow, right? Like, it's just continuing to show up. Eventually you get good. Like jiu-jitsu, you know, some people, it takes a long time. Other people get there quicker. Like, people have, you know, different abilities to learn and do things, but nobody who continues to show up doesn't become a black belt eventually, right? But you have to show up. Like, your job is just to make sure that you're actually there.
I dig that. Although there's some shitty ass black belts out there.
Yeah, well, you have to have a good coach, right?
I'm only saying what I'm listening. This is sauna talk. You guys aren't privy to.
And you know, that's why Derik got teared up. You know, I locked myself in a bathroom after I Ironman for my black belt in Berkeley because I was sobbing. You know, and I only, you know, cry in the shower, and so I locked myself in the bathroom. And the reason why isn't because of the belt. Like, he wasn't teared up because he's a purple belt now. It's because it meant something, because he values his coaches.
You're getting teared right now talking
opinion.
about it.
But that's what it is. And if you have a shitty coach, then the belts won't mean anything.
Yeah.
But if you have a coach that you respect and you trust them, then it means a lot. It means a lot when your coach gives you a belt, no matter what belt it is.
So show up.
Show up, yeah. Show up. Look, I think with all like the self-help stuff out there now and all the, you know, the different like life coaching stuff, and, you know, everybody's looking for like some kind of shortcut or easy answer or something that's going to make them feel good. And it's like, if you want more, do more. Like, just work harder. Like, stop looking for cheats and shortcuts. Like, there are no shortcuts. At least I haven't found any yet.
I 100% agree, Dan, and I talk about that constantly. What do you got?
I'd say change takes time, and you don't have time to wait. If you are unhappy that you don't have enough money or you don't have a retirement, it's not going to happen overnight. You know, something you talked about recently with, you know, every time you wanted to buy a gun or buy something, we were talking about, you put that money somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, to you've found success financially, and so those are bigger purchases, but you don't have that much money. Every time you want to go buy Starbucks, take that $5 and put it in, you know, a stash account or an investment account. if you want to be good at jiu-jitsu, come to class every day, and eventually, there's no shortcut. I mean, there are people that have gotten black belts in 3 or 4 years, but 3 or 4 years is still a long time and a major commitment.
Z talks about putting money in the piggy bank. Like if you go to the bank, but you never put anything in there, that skill, that takedown, like, isn't going to be in the bank if you didn't put it in the bank.
Yeah, and if, whatever's important to you, that's what you need to focus on. If, you're saying, well, I can't afford to take my family on vacation, but you're out at the bar drinking all the time, like maybe you should stop going to the bar. Or maybe one night a week, don't go to the bar and take that $20 or $30 and put it in a fund until you have enough money to do it. And the amount of people now, I've been training for around 10 years. There's people that have been telling me for 10 years that they're going to come train at the gym too. That's not a joke. I'm serious.
I 100% believe you. I've told you that before.
And there's people that started with me that quit that have been telling me for the 9 years that they're going to come back, and they're out of shape and this and that, and you just have to do it and start doing it. It's like I think you gave me the book, The Compound Effect.
Yeah.
Small changes over time result in big results. If
yeah.
the three of us all live identical lives, but every night, I have dessert and Henry eats a normal meal and Travis goes out and runs 2 miles, after a couple of years, our bodies are going to look a lot different based on that.
Yeah.
Small changes over a long period of time, are what are going to result in real tangible results. And I think it speaks to what Andy said too. You don't have to go out and train like a world champion every single day and, do 2 hours of cardio and all this other stuff. If you come to class every day or 3 or 4 times a week, after a long enough period of time, someone's going to tie a black belt around your waist, and you're going to be able to defend yourself in a life and death situation. You're going to have those skills. If you put away $20 a week in an interest-bearing account for 10 years, you're going to have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. I dig that. What do you got, Coach?
I think it goes back to a little bit what we talked about before, is just surround yourself with good people. I don't think anybody achieves a high level of success in life without good people around them. All of my success is due to, I've had so much support along the way, so much people that were willing to share their knowledge with me about all different aspects of life. And so just make sure you surround yourself with people that you can learn from. And one of the things I always talk about too in jiu-jitsu is be open to being wrong.
Yeah.
I think so many times people think like this is the best way, or I know the best, or I know. And for me, when I teach, I say, listen, this is the way that I do it. And hopefully it's better than what you were doing before. It works better than what you were doing before. But again, I'm always open to being wrong. I'm always open to learning a better way of doing things. And so I'm never stuck with the way that I do it. I'm always kind of on the search for more knowledge or for improvement.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think you have to be open to being wrong if there's any growth possible.
I dig that. Your point leads into what I would say, like I am not used to being the one that sucks at whatever. So like Dan said it to me the other day, like most people don't want to come and be bad at something. Like, hey, I'm going to keep going to soccer and sucking. Eventually you won't show up. So for me, it's a great ego check. I'm not that egotistical that I think I'm great at everything, because I know I'm not. But Z talks about it constantly, our friend Z, that it's a very disconcerting thing when another man or a woman lets you know that you can't stop them from hurting you. So Z's a bad man, and he tells a story about being in combatives training environment, and some man that he was physically stronger than and younger than just dominating him. And he's like, I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. So I dedicated myself to making that not happen. And he spent freaking 18 years becoming a bad man. But like that's kind of like, for me, it's not about beating up somebody. It's about not being in a position where like my life is out of my control. And I talk to people like you guys and constantly tell you to go do something better. So if I can't do it myself, then what kind of a hypocrite or a piece of shit am I? So that's like my thrust, and it's a great thing. Like being your point about people, that is all it is. Derik, Dan, great friends, my wife over there, and you guys that I've just met this past week. Like this is the good stuff that life is made out of. I tell people constantly, only 56 people signed the declaration. Just 56 dudes. No chicks. They weren't allowed to vote or
Not even
anything.
in the room, yeah.
Those are the good old days.
But that's pretty powerful.
They're making sandwiches.
Yeah, they were making Sammy's tea, dumping the tea or something. But 56 people created our whole way of life, which has created liberty around the world. So like you get a group of dudes together, you can, or females as well, you can do some pretty powerful stuff. So I hope that you guys enjoyed just listening to all of these fine people talk a little bit about what's brought them success and happiness and pleasure in life, and take something away from that. Do something with your own life of value, because as Derik said, you will die. There's a grave or an urn or possibly a plastic bag with some lime if you're a bad person waiting for you somewhere, which is creepy. But it's coming, and you might as well use your life to do something of value. So in that, check all these people out. We will throw up links to all of their social media accounts. I would follow them. If you get a chance to train with any of them, I would do that too. And that's all we got. Don't be dickheads.
Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.